Hi. Woo! All right. Hi, everybody. How are we? Yay! All right. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to hear Amy talk. This is awesome. What a crowd we have, like for real. My name is Sarah Colley. Sorry. And I am the Community Engagement Coordinator here at the Great Falls Public Library. The Great Falls Public Library is here to serve as a connection point to empower the community and enhance the quality of life by providing individuals access to information and social, cultural, and recreational resources. One day I will memorize our mission. Today is not that day. I am so excited to have you all here. As always, we have a lot going on at the library, and it's very impactful when we get to see this many bright and smiley faces in one room. Here we are. Hey, come on in. Clearly we like to have a lot of fun, so if ever there's a point where you guys have suggestions on authors that you want to see here at the library, or if you have a program idea that you want to see come to fruition, I'm the gal to talk to. Again, my name's Sarah Colley, but you're welcome to chat with me. We can go have coffee. I love coffee, obviously. And we can go from there. Just a couple of housekeeping things, because this isn't the Sarah Colley show, it's the Amy show. Elevators are obviously out the door. Bathrooms are out the door and to the right, and in case of an emergency, the emergency exits are out the door, to the right, and then to the right again. In case of an emergency, please don't take the elevator. We will show you where to go. Obviously the emergency exit and then outside. And with that, yay, the fun things get to start. So, Amy Wright Pearson is a writer, teacher, and wilderness advocate. She grew up on a farm in north central Montana and earned a PhD in organizational communication from Arizona State University. After finishing her formal education, she hit the road to Asia for a few years. I'm jealous. But found herself missing the mountains of Montana. Amy has worked for the Park Service, Forest Service, in the environmental nonprofit sector, and now as a professor for the Great Falls College. Amy will be reading her work and talking about her experiences that led to her creation of her first book of poetry, 100 Days of Solitude. And with that, I'm so excited to welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here today, and it's so fun for me just to see some of the people that I have started to get to know here in our Great Falls community, just from different sectors of some of the things that I do or like to do. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And I wanted to tell Sarah Colley thank you for having me and for all the amazing community organization she's doing here for the public library. I think she deserves a round of applause because you're doing amazing work here.
Thank you.
And I love all the speakers that are coming in. I think there's something really important, come on in, and powerful about being able to listen to other people and hear about interesting topics. So thank you for all that you do and for being here. I also wanted to give a shout out to a couple of people. Scott Thompson from Great Falls College, who does marketing, has been a great supporter and promoter, thank you. And Lee Larson in the back, who also wrote a nice little review about my book. Just thanks for your support. Let's clap for them too. Supporting local work and writing. Appreciate all of you. I also wanted to say thanks to Wild Montana, who are a nonprofit that I've been involved in for about a decade now, and they've been really supportive of the work that I've done in the wilderness sector and my talks about wilderness and my little book of poems here, which we're going to talk about tonight, which is called 100 Days of Solitude. So thank you so much for being here. Well, I guess you know my name is Amy Pearson, and Sarah read nice biography of some of the things that I've done. But the reason I'm here talking to you tonight is because I had a really powerful experience in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, where I spent 3 months living in this building that you see pictured here. So this is Jumbo Lookout, and it's located in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And they say that Jumbo Lookout is one of the most remote lookouts in the lower 48. I don't know if that has been, double verified or not, but that is one of the things they say about this lookout. And just out of curiosity, I wanted to kind of start off by getting a sense of how many of you know or have spent time in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. Can I just get okay, quite a few of you, which I assumed would probably be the case. But let me keep going with some other questions. So next, how many of you have ever been to Jumbo Lookout? There's one enthusiastic person in the back, and it happens to be my husband. And the reason that he has been there is, how did you get there, Jesse?
He took me.
I did. I took him to the lookout last summer, which I'm going to talk about too. And one of the reasons you probably haven't been there is because it's actually pretty difficult to get to. So the closest entry point is really from Benchmark, which is outside of Augusta. So probably a lot of you have been to Benchmark or have hiked out of that area. So if you hike out of Benchmark and you go about 22 miles west over Stadler Pass, and then up a mountain 4 miles, you'll get to Jumbo Lookout. And that's the shortest entry point to the lookout. The way that I went to the lookout is I started at Meadow Creek, which is on the north end of the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And you start at Spotted Bear Ranger Station, which is about 55 miles south of Hungry Horse on a dirt road. You have to drive about 30 miles an hour on that road to get back there to Spotted Bear Ranger Station. And Meadow Creek is right around there. So I started my journey at that spot because I was hired by Spotted Bear Ranger Station to work for Jumbo Lookout. But let's backtrack a little bit and talk about the Bob Marshall Wilderness itself. So the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, anybody know how many acres of land that it incorporates, encapsulates? Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex? 1.5 million acres. Yes, there are 1.5 million acres of wilderness right in the middle of our state, the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex. The Bob Marshall Wilderness itself is just over 1 million, but then we also have the Great Bear Wilderness and the Scapegoat Wilderness that are on the north and south ends that make it that complex, okay? So the Bob Marshall Wilderness was named for Bob Marshall, yes, very good, excellent. And he was, of course, an important conservationist in the United States from the East Coast originally, spent time in Montana and a lot of time in Alaska, and was one of our founding figures to work on this notion of wilderness. He was a founder of the Wilderness Society and spent a lot of his time and money supporting causes to make sure we could one day have designations of wilderness, which is what happened in 1964 when the Wilderness Act passed. Bob Marshall Wilderness got designated wilderness. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on wilderness, but I'm very passionate about wilderness and about that designation, because what does it mean if a piece of land is designated as wilderness? I know there are some people in here who know what that means, because I see Wild Montana wilderness advocates, but what's a wilderness?
Non-motorized. Unpaved.
Non-motorized, untrammeled.
Forever.
People themselves are visitors to these landscapes and do not stay, right? That's part of the definition. So it's a pretty special place where you can go and get away from all of the motorized noise that we experience on our daily basis. And it's just, there are a lot of great reasons behind wilderness and the idea. So I got to spend time in the Bob Marshall Wilderness pretty much by myself in this building, working for the Forest Service, looking to spot fires. Okay, so that was kind of my job. So let's get back to where I started in my journey and heading into the woods. So a lot of times when I tell people that I had this experience, they really want to know what the heck I was doing with all that time, right? What are you doing when you're hanging out in this building by yourself? So the way that I'm framing my conversation with you tonight is about some of the traditions of being a lookout and some of the things that I would do on a daily basis. And I'll also talk about some of the trials, so why it can be a challenging experience, and then triumphs. So what are some of the things I learned that were powerful and important? So I've got some slides I want to share here with you. First, let's start with the training to be a fire lookout. I went through guard school, which is part of becoming a wildland firefighter. So in 2015, when I was heading back to be a lookout, it was one of those very dry seasons in Montana. Not a lot of moisture, high predictions of fire probability. So when people found out I was going back there, I got a lot of really kind of terrified looks on people's faces. You know, there's the aspect that I'm going back there by myself, and then there's this aspect of the fire danger that was imminent. And it was a pretty big fire season that year. So we got prepared for that. So I went to guard school, which included, so you see me, I'm smiling, but this was not fun, okay? This was hard work. So we went out and practiced digging fire line and kind of learning what it might be like were a fire to erupt, and we were in that situation where we would have to deploy our fire shelters and such. I'm looking at Lee's face and she's just like horrified, sorry. So, you know, one of the things we had to do, we're practicing digging fire line up this trail, and then the folks who were doing the training came behind us and said, okay, now drop all of your tools and make a big run for it, and then, you know, you have to get to this spot, otherwise, you know, you're not gonna make it. So it was quite an intense experience, but I think important too for kind of getting a sense of how we might deal with the stress in those instances and kind of be prepared as much as possible. So guard school is no joke. That's an intense experience, but good preparation for what might be ahead. So let's talk about some of the traditions of being a lookout. How many of you have been to a lookout before, a fire lookout? Okay, great. So I was having a conversation with my friend Lee before, just a few minutes ago, and we were talking about how, you know, the architecture of lookouts is really pretty interesting, but also the whole thing is a little strange if you really start to think about it, right? I mean, a person living up in there by themselves is kind of a unique situation that you're dealing with and doing. But I was always kind of fascinated by lookouts, you know, since I was a kid, hearing about lookouts and just why would you go up there and do this job? And, you know, what would that be like? A lot of lookouts are very literary, and I thought, you know, that was kind of interesting too. And there might be something to that in terms of the amount of time that you have on your hands, right? But the tradition of being a lookout was interesting to me, and it was something I wanted to do. So let's look at a few photos that kind of represent some of the traditions of what you're doing. See if these look familiar. So a lot of what you're doing is really hanging out. You know, I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of just hanging around. But in the middle of that, you know, you're making your simple meals, you're kind of, because it's one of the things you're doing, and you have to be careful with that, which we're gonna get to with the trials. But I was really attuned to what time it was, surprisingly, because it was like, okay, it's so easy to let time just slip away when you're not in your ordinary routine of life. So when the time would turn to 11:30, it's like, okay, time to get the meal going. You know, that was one thing that you could do as kind of a ritual of the day. Lots of sitting, looking around at the landscape. Is that a smoke or is that a cumulus cloud? It took a while before I could really discern, and I got better at it as I went through the season, but that was interesting. So the radio, you're spending a lot of time on the radio. So every day you're taking weather reports, temperature, wind, was there lightning last night, and you're making those reports to the dispatch center so they can try to help do fire management if necessary. So that was an interesting part of the day as well, and helping out if you could, if there were people in the backcountry who needed something and you had radio access. So this is in my look, this is right in Jumbo actually, and so this was my cook stove right there. So I have my pan, my cast iron pan. Does anybody know what this machine is in the middle? Rick, what is that?
Osborne firefinder or Alidade.
Yes, and he knows that because he also was a fire lookout. Just pretty cool connection. So the Osborne firefinder, so you had one of those in your lookout, Rick? Most of them do. And on this lookout there's a map and of the Bob, and Jumbo Lookout is centralized from that map. So when I looked on that site situation, it would give me an angle from the lookout that I could look at towards a smoke. So I see a smoke, and I line it up with the firefinder, and then I'm able to give that angle of coordinates to dispatch to try to help identify where the fire's coming from. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. So that was a interesting part of my job too, was learning how to use some of these traditional tools. It was beautiful. It was a stunning experience just getting to look at the sky all day and just be present with the landscape as it changed throughout the day and throughout the season. I took a picture of the sunset every night, and I still haven't done anything with that, but I think it'd be cool to have, you know, like some kind of series of those put together, but it was just beautiful. These are my two buddies. This is Tommy, and that's Leon. And I'd like to actually share a little bit more about them with you, okay? So this is from my little book, and it's called I Keep Company with Goats. I keep company with goats, or they keep company with me. I'm not too sure which way that goes. But anyway, we do the same things, walk around slow, unless some sort of thing alarms, we stare at each other, then scuttle clumsily on rock. We spend time staring at the void, that gigantic void that looks like sky and cloud, mountain. It's just the backdrop of our dramas, which really are nothing at all. But there is a grouse, that one darn grouse, who always plods around in fear. Fear on his face, fear in his walk, that looks catching. We don't like him because we're brave, though I've seen Leon hold his breath, but no concern, it's fine, we talked. Leon used to come with Tom, a bolder sort, a route finder, but I'm not sure, maybe they fought, went their own ways. I haven't seen Tom here in weeks. But anyway, Leon's okay. He comes around at 8:30, looking around, looking for something. Yeah, join the club. We watch sunset, meander about, I exchange a few words. We sneer at the grouse, who shall remain nameless. I keep company with goats, or they keep company with me. I'm not too sure which way that goes. So along with the traditions of eating, and I also did lots of reading and listening and sitting, there were some hardships. Does anyone want to guess at what those may have been? I'm so used to having the classroom where, you know,
Cold?
yeah, people were just calling out. No, yes, the temperature was, it could be uncomfortable sometimes, for sure.
Loneliness.
Boom. Jerry hit it on the head there. That was probably the biggest challenge. And I've always been a person who enjoyed spending time by myself, which is another reason I thought, hey, I might like this. But that was a totally different situation, being there by myself all of that time. And I really noticed it when, I'll tell you this quick story. When I had some days off, I would hike down from the lookout and try to explore the bob as much as I could. You know, I would have a few days, so I went as far as I could, stayed at some of the backcountry cabins. And I remember one time it was getting closer to the end of my time, and I had hiked up, for those of you who know the bob, so I'm at Jumbo Lookout. I hiked north towards Big Prairie Ranger Station, and then further north and went over White River Pass. So I was on the east front at that point, and I came down near Prairie Reef Lookout, which is more familiar to lots of folks, and there was a campground down there. So I'm coming around this corner and I could hear people. I could hear laughter, and I could hear, you know, interactions going on, like they would be in the summertime. But I had a moment where I felt so disconnected from that, or like so much like I couldn't fit with that way of being at that moment, that I didn't try to go talk with them, right? But I had a moment where I thought, I'm missing something, or like I'm missing out on something, right? I mean, I was having this incredible experience and, you know, seeing these amazing things, and I'm so thankful. But at the same time, I had this thought where there's something missing here in my life. Other people, right, which are really important. So that was really challenging. And let's look at some of the other things. So here's some photos to kind of illustrate the challenges. So the whole rationing of food thing in and of itself, right? I know some of you have been here. You get hungry one evening, and you go down and you just mow down on a bag of chips. I know. We've all been there, or whatever, right? Well, if you do that at the lookout, guess what? You're out of food. Yeah. So I had to be really attentive about what I was using up. And I did have one resupply in the middle of the season, but one resupply, right? So you had to be careful. You had to be really thoughtful about what you were eating.
Oh, Amy,
Yeah,
I hope I can ask questions, but
yeah.
do any of your photos have the trail up to the lookout? Is that like the goat picture, does that have a trail in it?
I don't think that one does. I do have some like that though, Dave, and I'll share those with you. Yeah. So I did have a tradition every day of reciting or reading poetry out loud, or reading, or talking to myself too. I don't know if that yet. Also, to just hear another voice. I listened to the radio a little bit too to kind of help with that, but that got kind of tough. We talked about that loneliness aspect. And then there were just kind of some eerie moments, which we have sometimes, at night if there's a storm, but usually we have someone else we can kind of talk about it with, right? Or the next day. But when you're by yourself, it's like, whoa, that's what's going on here, And you're just trying to deal with it. there was a night where there was a lightning storm, and you're by yourself in this building on the top of a mountain that's made of glass. Yeah. So you're seeing all of it, and it's kind of all around you. And it did strike pretty close to the lookout, and I saw a tree like torch up. Yeah, and I'm sitting on they have a chair with this special, do you know about this, Rick? The special like glass feet, so that if the building gets hit, you don't get electrocuted. So I'm sitting in that, like just huddled up, and I see this tree go up, and I remember getting on the radio and being like, there's a tree on fire, kind of by the lookout. And you're always being calm in the circumstance. And then a little while later, I hear this other Forest Service employee just get on and be like, "Amy, are you okay?" She kind of lost the call. I mean, I was okay. But just the notion that you could be in danger and be there by yourself, I guess, is kind of scary. And then at the end of the season, this is a ridge going to the southeast of the lookout, and I would walk out there every afternoon just to get a little exercise and kind of look at the landscape in a little bit of a different way. And I saw a scat out there one day. I was like, oh, I guess I need to pay a little more attention here when I'm going out on these walks. And there was a grizz, and she would bring up her sows up there, and they would take a nap in the afternoons, starting that was getting closer to when I was leaving in the fall, which makes sense, right? Because the bears are more active. They're out there getting their food and getting ready to go into semi-hibernation for the winter, right? But that was a little much sometimes, where I'm just like up there and I'm looking out at the bear, and it was kind of cool, but also kind of, yeah, thanks for understanding. There's lots of facial expressions of empathy, so I appreciate that. So I love the traditions of the day, the rituals that I would get into. There were these challenges, though, of course, too. And then there were some really amazing, unique components of this experience. So look at that. Better than at home, huh?
They don't complain, but no.
Oh, there's a trail, Dave. That's when they were packing me up. Yeah.
Cool.
Amy, can you talk about the fire lookout, the structure itself? Is that glass? Is it plexiglass? How is it built?
Yeah. I'll show a picture here in a bit that has a day photo so you can kind of see it, but it's a wooden structure. They're all a little bit different. Every lookout is a little bit different. Not every, but there's different types and styles of lookouts. This lookout is about 15 feet by 15 and made out of wood with glass windows on every side. So that was kind of we can go look at some of those other pictures too. But
How far off the ground are they?
this jumbo is right on the rock. It's just directly on the rocks. But a lot of you have been to lookouts, they're up on stilts, which just gives the building a little more elevation for people to see if there's a smoke. But this particular lookout, I think because of where it's at, needed to be just flat on that rock to be grounded like that. And it was up, it's 8,284 feet. So you have a pretty good view from where you're at in that one. But one of the things that I really felt like I learned was how to value what I had, what I have with me. And so even though it was a challenge about food, it was also sort of like, I was on a trail crew in Many Glacier for Glacier Park one summer, and I had a great trail crew boss, and he gave me this thought. He said, we don't need as much as we think we do. And it seems like very obvious, but he said that, and it just I kind of took that with me. And I think this really relates to that, is that the simple things that we can have, like enough food, not an excessive amount, is enough, right? And to value that. So to value those simple things of life. That was a powerful lesson.
Amy, what do you do about water?
There were QBs of water, and that, I don't know how much is in a QB anymore, I used to know, but it's a plastic container that they use a lot in the fire community, and they would fill those with they had a bunch of them filled with water that were stored at the lookout, and then they brought a few up also when I was starting my season. But that's another thing that I had to be really careful about with water, because at Jumbo, there's not a water supply.
Okay.
At a lot of lookouts, there would be, so you could filter your water, but Jumbo didn't have access to that, so I had QBs that were stored. Okay, it was also very cool to kind of take a step out of our normal everyday life and do something else, and just kind of sit back and do my own thing. And that's great, whatever everyone else is doing in society, but I'm just here, for the moment, taking a deep breath. That was pretty powerful too. So listen to magic, and I said that because while I was at Jumbo, there was a version of this book, the first one, that was at the lookout. And I thought to myself, how cool would that be to get a poem in an anthology of Montana Redders someday? And then, when I hiked out of the lookout, I met Lowell Yeager in the Flathead Valley, who was one of our poet laureates for the state a few back. We became friends. I find myself in his poetry class. He's editing my poems, and guess what? I get a poem in the next version of that same book. I mean, that's just kind of powerful stuff, right? It's like, how does that... I love when life kind of works out that way, or you have this idea and then something tangible occurs. So that's what I'm talking about there. It was an amazing experience. You learn to figure things out when you're by yourself, because you have to. So on occasions where you get lost in the woods, you lose your way, which I did. I had even a moment of panic and stress, but when you're by yourself, what do you have to do? Figure it out and learn to take care of yourself. So I had to learn to read a landscape really well, right? Think about, here's the map, where's the water supposed to be? And then how do I get back to that creek crossing where I must have gone the wrong direction, right? You have to learn to figure it out, which I think translates so well to other aspects of life, right? We learn things in the wilderness, and we have these experiences, and then we can think back to that lesson, right? I'm in a situation, it's like, what do I do here? Well, at least I can trust that I know how to figure things out because I have had to do that before. So some of those lessons were really important. We're home. I learned I can be home just exactly where I am in this place, this small building. Being comfortable with ourselves. That's the next one. But it relates. Being at home. Being who you are. I want to show you this slide here. So I penned this while I was at the lookout. I wanted to become more myself, whatever that is. Results are pending, re-entry to society. And then I wrote down 100 Days of Solitude. I wanted that opportunity to just be me and try to understand who I am and, what it means to be a person, what it means to be this person. And I think getting away like that was a wonderful opportunity to see, with everything else non-distracting, what is this? So, I talked about this experience at an event last April, and while I was preparing for that, I was just crying every time I tried to think about what I would say. And I think that's because it's almost hard to talk about the experience in some ways because it was so powerful and it was an opportunity to just be an authentic version of myself. And then, we find ourselves in society and doing impression management all the time in these different contexts that we find ourselves in. But in that situation, I just got to relax into being the person that I am. And that was a cool experience. Okay. So last summer, I got to take my husband back into the woods and show him the lookout. So I wanted to throw this picture up. So Lee, you can kind of see then here, this is all the wooden part. There's the solar power theme. And then the little windows like that. And then there's a catwalk that goes around the edges, so you could kind of walk around that. And here you're seeing it sit on the rock on Jumbo Mountain. Kind of, this side was kind of just an edge, but there were two ridges going to the north and to the south. So it was pretty neat to bring my husband back there because I spent all that time there by myself. So to have my partner with me and experience it that way was really beautiful, and I'm grateful for that too. So thank you. Oh, I want to read you one more poem. And this one is called I Got to Use This Pen. Hiked 67 miles over 2 mountain passes. A grizz snarled loud, bolted off into the brush. It was across the White River, at least 10 feet tall. No joke. Slept in a mule shed, huddled between 2 bales of hay and 3 propane tanks. Listened to the flutes at Indian Point all night long, really, all night. In the morning, pulled on 2 wet socks, stuck them in 2 wet boots, ate half of a granola bar the mice had left, got lost on Ahorn Creek. Got found on Ahorn Creek. Said hallelujah to the void. I once was lost, but then I got to Pearl Basin. Then I got to Jumbo Mountain. Then I got to use this pen. Well, thank you. Yeah, questions?
How many fires did you spot over the course of 100 days?
That's such a good question. So it was 90, let me see how many thousands of acres burned that summer. 95,000 acres burned in our district. I probably reported, I never counted out, but at least 10, which maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a lot.
But each one that you reported probably had a measurable impact in terms of, by reporting it, something could be done and it could have been much
Right.
worse.
Right, and so with the fires, when there's the start of them, which you're reporting, but there's also the monitoring of them. And with the smaller fires, it's wilderness, so it's good in some ways for fire to burn through. So with smaller fires, just keeping an eye on them. But then, right, with fires that are getting a little bit more out of control, we're wanting to keep our structures safe back there. We're wanting to keep people safe. So that was a big part of it, for sure. That's why I was back there. I didn't talk about that much, but yes, I was back there to do fire reporting and observing. Yes?
Say if you had fallen and say broken an arm, how long would it take someone to get to you?
Yeah. The closest, it would, I guess the short answer is it would depend, which isn't very specific, but there was a ranger station 17 miles away at Big Prairie, so they could have sent somebody from there. They would have, of course, in an emergency, or even if it was a big emergency, I'm sure they could have sent helicopter or some kind of aircraft, because they did use those at times to help with the fire situation. So, I mean, it's wilderness. You don't want the mechanized crafts back there, but for fire danger and fire situations, they would, bring them in sometimes, which I had some things to say about, but yeah, that's what would have happened. And I did have a radio, so I could, call and let people know where it was and there was a situation. So, yeah, good question.
Sarah, how did you first decide to take this endeavor on?
Yeah. Like all good things, it was very serendipitous. I had just come back from Japan, actually, and I was trying to figure out my life and what I was going to do. And I was hanging out in Whitefish, Montana, and ran into a gal whose boyfriend, this is more than you want to know, was managing the Isaac Walton Inn. And she was like, why don't you come work for us at the Isaac Walton Inn? And I was like, sure, that'd be great. So I went there for the winter, and I met a fellow who's a packer for the district, and we started talking, and he was like, you need to go check this place out. So that was it. I met this person that thought I should do this. But I mean, I've been fascinated by lookouts and thought it would be an interesting thing to do before that. So, and then I was a lookout one other season, but I was more of a wildland firefighter that year. Dave?
Amy, I'm just imagining the wind up there must have been ferocious, is that right?
Yeah, Dave, you need to check out this little book that I wrote, because probably 90% of them are talking about the wind. That's the main topic.
Was the cabin stable?
Yeah.
Rock.
Yeah, the lookout itself was really secure. No rocking of any sort, but just that constancy of the wind, which we all can relate to being here in Great Falls. Right? It's okay and then it isn't. It's just like, yeah, but there's nothing you can do about it. It's a natural phenomenon. Peter?
I think we've all seen some outlooks that are no longer staffed, and I'm wondering, with technology, will there be fewer and fewer staffed ones, and can technology take the place of what you did?
I've had conversations along these lines a few times, and there are a lot of people who will say the lookouts are unnecessary because our technological advances can monitor everything that's going on. And we were talking about that too. Sometimes when I'd report a lightning strike from the night before, the dispatch office already knew because they have a GPS system that can say where the lightning struck the land. But in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I think it's important to have a human presence there because we can get the technical information, but having a person there just to kind of help with the communication back there in the woods with people that might need help who are in the wilderness, or just kind of monitoring really closely what's actually happening by watching it. I think that's really important. That's where I'm coming from. And the tradition of it. I love the history and the tradition of it, and the lookouts themselves are beautiful and important.
Did those solar panels generate all the electricity that you needed for the entire 100 days?
Yeah, they actually worked really well. And, I did have a lamp that I could use at night and I could charge things, So, yeah, that worked really well. I mean, no cell service or anything like that, but for a light at night, absolutely, it was great. Heath?
What would you say within that experience? You mentioned that when you went up to that camp, you heard all of the laughter and that kind of difference of like socialization and not having socialized for so long. What was your re-entry into, quote, society like, and how did that most affect you?
Wow, that is such a good question. It was really hard for me. It was really hard. I remember just taking a shower, these things that we take for granted as part of our everyday life that are so convenient, using a toilet, turning the light just on, and having all of those things, it was overwhelming. And I wasn't back there for, years or something like that, but even the amount of time that I got acclimated to more kind of natural, using the daylight and going to sleep when it got dark, and the quiet, or the noises that are natural, as opposed to, So it was challenging. It was really, it took me some time to kind of adjust. And I remember I was in Las Vegas for some reason. Don't ask me about that. But I remember being completely overwhelmed, just with the lights and with sounds and just, that can be overwhelming anyway, but imagine you've been in the woods and suddenly it's just, yeah. So, yeah, that was really challenging.
How many books did you read?
I did actually keep a record of them. I need to look back at that, but a lot. That was fun. And you had a question.
Yeah. Was there a specific moment where you felt like you kind of got acclimated to being in total solitude, or was it gradual, or do you remember a specific time, or like, I'm just used to this now, or did you get used to it?
Yeah. I remember at first it was so exciting that I was just thrilled by it. And I'd been in a lot of large groups for our Forest Service trainings, and I like to have time by myself, so for me it was kind of a relief at first. But then you start you start kind of missing things and missing people, and then, hearing the laughter like that one time was like, gosh, I would say it sort of was an ebb and flow, that sometimes it was, and like it is for us anyway, right, where some days are better than others, or some days you want to be by yourself, or some days you want somebody to interact with, but the difference being, if you wanted to interact with somebody, there wasn't anyone there to do that, so you had a lack. But also it got kind of weird, in the sense that at one point, I knew I had to go down for something, and I felt anxiety about leaving the lookout. So I don't know if you're becoming just accustomed to your space, and it's like your small space, and the world seems so huge out there, because you're listening to the radio, and you're busy. But it got kind of weird. I'm glad you asked that.
At what point in time did you decide that you were going to write all of these poems and put them into a book form? Were you continuously writing while you were up there, or was it like a reflection afterwards?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It was, I was writing just while I was there at the lookout, and I like to write anyway. It's how I process things the best. So I was just writing during my experience, and then at the end of it, I met that poet, and started looking back at some of the things I'd written, and he and some others encouraged me to put them together into a little collection. So that's really why that came about. It was an accident. Okay? I'm not trying to be famous here, okay? Yeah.
Your vigilance, was there any required in the evenings after dark?
Yeah, definitely, because it's the natural world, which is not on our timetable, really, you know what I mean? So definitely there were times where I'd be up working really late on the radio, or monitoring a fire situation, or in the morning. People were checking in with me all the time, from the different areas, to see what was going on. My FMO, my fire management officer, wanted to see what was happening. And then there are different layers of the organization who want to know what's going on too. So, and that in some cases that could be really strange hours of the day. Yeah. It was exciting. Yeah.
Was it easier or harder or about the same to sleep? And did your dreams change, or like how was your sleep?
You don't have to share your dreams if you don't want to.
Thanks for that. I mean, in some ways, it was easier to sleep because of the non-noise, but in other ways, it was really challenging because I was worried. I mean, I was full of anxiety because I felt responsible for the wilderness, and I felt like, you know, if something is happening and I don't report on it, you know, like that's on me. Or if, you know, there's a fire and I didn't see it, like that's going to be terrible and humiliating. So sleep, I was just kind of still in a constant awareness of I need to be ready. So it's a complicated, sleep is complicated. No. Thanks for asking.
Okay, and I know I keep going back to the construction of this, but were there blinds or curtains, or did you? I'm just.
I don't think you have a good see it.
Right, did you have a maid come in? No, but in all seriousness, were you just in sunlight until it's set? Because that's like a mind shift too. Like right now, we're in a basement and there's still sun out right now. Like just being in perpetual sunlight for 100 days. I mean, I know there's nights, but it's just that just seems trippy too. In the same vein of like sleep and dreams, like
Yeah.
to not have blinds or curtains.
Yeah, I think that I can't really remember actually, Lee, because I didn't use the blinds. There might have been blinds, but I didn't. I like to.
Yeah.
I grew up on a farm, and we didn't have, you know, we're not neighbors. We just didn't really, I don't know. That's my reason. That sounds so strange saying that. But no, but I like your question though. It's like when I was basically outside the whole, I mean, you know, yeah, and in the light, it was amazing. I mean, we need that, I think. I love my job right now in my office, but there's not a window. There's not light coming in, and it affects us, right? When we go out, it's finally like, oh, I'm alive, you know? So I felt very alive, you know, very free, and very much like, you know, an animal, like a person, you know, living thing. It was cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, I have one quote that I want to leave with you, and then we can talk more too if you have any other questions. But up at the lookout, there was this great Edward Abbey, who was a fire lookout too, and wrote lots of great little books. And there was a quote by him that was at the lookout that is his benediction. You probably may have heard it before, and it goes, "May your trails be crooked, winding, lonesome, dangerous, leading to the most amazing view, where storms come and go as lightning clangs upon the high crags, where something strange and more beautiful and more full of wonder than your deepest dreams waits for you."